Humanity had long been shaped by the relentless trials of Earth. Millennia of climate disasters, resource shortages, and catastrophic wars had forced evolution to accelerate. What once would have been fatal challenges turned into catalysts for human adaptation. Humans had become tougher, faster, and more resilient. The world they lived in was harsh, unrecognizable from its former glory, and alien eyes looking upon Earth saw only a ruined, broken planet, an easy conquest. But they were gravely mistaken. Grisoli invaders, an arrogant and powerful alien race, looked upon humanity as weak and inferior. They had studied Earth's history, learning of humanity's past wars, their self-inflicted suffering, and the planet's decline. To them, this was a primitive world, ripe for the taking. They had no idea of the deadly skill set humans had developed under the weight of these harsh conditions. The skies above Earth were clouded in grey as Grisoli ships descended with eerie silence. Their sleek, metallic vessels gleamed under the dim light, casting long shadows over the devastated landscape. Commander Zorak, leader of the Grisoli force, stepped off his ship, his tall, armored figure cutting an imposing silhouette. Behind him, his soldiers fanned out, scanning the environment. Where are the humans? Are they as weak as we've been led to believe? Kotal, Zorak asked, turning to his second-in-command. Kotal, a seasoned soldier with a calculating gaze, paused for a moment. I doubt it, Commander. The reports may have exaggerated their strength. At best, we might find a few scattered survivors, remnants of their past wars, Kotal said confidently. But their confidence was misplaced. Beneath the surface of the Earth, in a series of interconnected underground tunnels, humanity's resistance forces lay in wait. John, the leader of one such group, was no ordinary human. Like many who had survived in this harsh new world, his body had evolved. His muscles stronger, his reflexes sharper, and his endurance unmatched. Decades of survival had shaped him into a weapon. The human resistance had been preparing for this moment, for the inevitable day when invaders would come, seeing Earth as vulnerable prey. John crouched in the dimly lit tunnel, watching the Grisoli ships descend through a series of old surveillance monitors. His heart beat steadily, his mind sharp and focused. At his side, Sarah, his second-in-command, whispered, "What's the plan? They've brought more soldiers than we expected." John's gaze never wavered from the screen. "It doesn't matter how many there are. This is our home, and we know it better than they ever will," he said calmly. He grabbed his radio, speaking into it softly, issuing orders to his team scattered across the underground network. "Move quietly. Set the traps. We strike when they least expect it." His team responded with disciplined silence, trained for this very scenario. They knew the Grisoli would rely on their technological superiority, unaware of the dangerous terrain beneath the surface. The humans had adapted, using their surroundings and guerrilla tactics to turn the tide. Above, Zorak and his forces moved cautiously through the abandoned streets of what had once been a major human city. The stillness of the air unnerved them. There were no signs of life, no sound, no movement, only the eerie silence of a world seemingly forgotten. "Something's wrong," Kotal muttered as he scanned the empty city. "It's too quiet." Zorak grunted, dismissing the concern. "They're cowards, probably hiding underground, waiting to be picked off like the weaklings they are." But before he could continue, explosions erupted from all sides. The streets they walked on were rigged with explosives, set off with precise timing. Grisoli soldiers were thrown into disarray, their formations broken. As they scrambled to regain control, the humans attacked. John and his team emerged from hidden tunnels and buildings, moving with lightning speed. Years of evolution and training had honed their bodies to perfection, allowing them to strike and vanish in the blink of an eye. The Grisoli, though physically strong and technologically advanced, were no match for the humans' intimate knowledge of their own land and their superior reflexes. "Ambush! Fall back!" Zorak shouted, his voice strained with shock as his soldiers fell around him. But retreat was impossible. The humans were too fast, too coordinated, their every move calculated. They fought not with brute force, but with the intelligence and precision born from years of survival against impossible odds. John, leading the charge, moved like a shadow through the chaos. His rifle barked fire, each shot finding its mark with lethal accuracy. Around him, his team struck with deadly efficiency, using traps, explosives, and their advanced hand-to-hand combat skills to dismantle the Grisoli forces. "You thought we were weak," John muttered under his breath as he dispatched another Grisoli soldier with a swift, lethal strike. "But you don't know what we've become." Zorak, bruised and bleeding, stumbled backward as the humans closed in. His soldiers were in full retreat, those that survived anyway, and the commander's arrogance had been shattered. He looked around, disoriented, trying to make sense of how things had gone so wrong so quickly. "Commander, we need to fall back," Kotal shouted, pulling Zorak out of his daze. Zorak clenched his fists, fury burning in his eyes. How are they doing this? They're supposed to be primitive. They're not the same humans we studied. They've changed. They've adapted, Kotal said, eyes wide with realization. They're stronger than we ever imagined. As they fled, John watched them disappear into the distance. His breathing was steady, his eyes cold and focused. This was only the beginning, and he knew the Grisoli would be back, with more forces, more technology, and more deadly intent. Sarah stepped up beside him, wiping the sweat from her brow. "We hit them hard, but they'll return. Stronger." John nodded, his jaw set in grim determination. "Let them come. We'll be ready." They had won the first battle, but John knew the war was far from over. The Grisoli underestimated them once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. But humanity had one advantage that no alien could ever fully understand: the indomitable will to survive. And John intended to use that to its fullest. As the sun set behind the devastated skyline, the underground tunnels echoed with the sounds of preparation. The humans were readying themselves for what was to come. The Grisoli's retreat was swift and chaotic, their once formidable soldiers now scrambling for their lives. The humans had caught them completely off guard, and the toll was staggering. For Commander Zorak, the shame was unbearable. He had expected an easy victory, an effortless conquest of a primitive world. But the humans had turned out to be far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Back on board the Krylon, Zorak stood before the high command of the Grisoli fleet. His superior, Admiral Koroth, appeared on the holographic screen, his piercing yellow eyes filled with disdain. "You were supposed to bring us victory, Zorak." Korotha's voice was laced with venom. "Instead, you've delivered a disaster. How could this happen?" Zorak's fists clenched, his pride deeply wounded. "They are more than we thought. These humans, they're not the fragile creatures our intelligence led us to believe. They've adapted, evolved. Their environment has made them." "Enough with your excuses," Koroth interrupted. "You were unprepared, and now we've suffered because of your incompetence. The humans must be eradicated, no matter how strong they've become." Zorak lowered his head, fighting back his anger. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Korotha's gaze turned cold. "We will deploy the elites." The elites. Zorak's heart sank. These were the most dangerous warriors in the Grisoli army, genetically enhanced soldiers, engineered for destruction. They were relentless, merciless, and perfect for crushing insurgents like the humans. But even with their strength, Zorak knew the next encounter with the humans wouldn't be as straightforward as the Grisoli command assumed. "They'll be ready," Zorak said quietly, but there was a flicker of doubt in his voice. The humans had surprised them once. Could they do it again? Meanwhile, deep within the human resistance's underground network, John and his team were regrouping. The adrenaline of their first victory had worn off, replaced by a grim understanding of what was to come. Sarah walked beside John as they passed through a bustling corridor where mechanics were repairing damaged equipment and soldiers were tending to their wounds. "Word is spreading fast. The Grisoli retreated with their tails between their legs," she said with a faint smile. "We gave them something to think about." John's face was unreadable. His mind was already moving ahead, strategizing. "This was just the first wave," he said. "They'll come back, and they won't underestimate us next time. We need to be ready." He entered the central command room, where several key members of the resistance were gathered around a large table. On it, holographic maps of Earth were projected, detailing Grisoli positions and their known movements. A young tech specialist, Liam, was tapping away at the console, pulling up data. "They've retreated to orbit," Liam reported, not looking up from his screen. "But they're regrouping. Their ship movements suggest they're calling for reinforcements." John nodded. "We knew this wouldn't end with one battle. What's the status of our defenses?" A grizzled older man named Marcus, a former military officer, leaned forward, his rough voice cutting through the tension. "We've got the perimeter fortified, and we've moved more of our people into defensive positions. But if they send another wave, especially with more advanced troops, we'll need more than just traps and guerrilla tactics to hold them off." John turned to Marcus. "We'll have to rely on strategy. We can't match them in technology, but we know this land better than they ever will." Marcus grunted. "We can't win a straight-up fight, but if we stay mobile, keep hitting them where they least expect it, we might just stand a chance." Sarah folded her arms, her brow furrowed. "What if they try something different this time? They underestimated us once. They won't do that again." John's eyes darkened. "They'll likely send their best, Grisoli elites. We've heard stories about them. But no matter how strong they are, we have an advantage they don't. This planet is ours. We've lived through hell here. They haven't." He turned to face the room. "We need to spread out. Use the terrain, keep moving, and don't let them pin us down. If they want to invade our world, we'll make them bleed for every inch." The room was silent for a moment before Marcus spoke again. "What about supplies? We're running low on ammo, food, and medical gear. If we keep fighting at this rate, we'll be out within a week." John glanced at Liam. "Any luck with the supply drops?" Liam shook his head. "The Grisoli ships are blocking any incoming transports. The only way we're getting new supplies is if we take down their orbital defenses." John exhaled sharply. "Then we'll need to be smarter. Use what we have sparingly. Every bullet, every bit of food, it all counts now." Later that night, John stood alone at the edge of one of the tunnels, overlooking the ruined city above. The sky was a dull gray, the moon barely visible through the thick clouds of dust. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on him, more than he ever expected when he took command of the resistance. Sarah approached quietly, her boots crunching softly on the gravel. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders," she said, standing beside him. John chuckled, though it was humorless. "I guess I do. It's not just about fighting them. It's about surviving. Making sure these people, all of them, have a future after this war is over." Sarah watched him for a moment. "You're doing everything you can. We all believe in you." John's eyes softened slightly, but his voice remained steady. It's not enough. If we lose everything we've fought for, everything we've sacrificed, it'll be for nothing. She placed a hand on his arm. We won't lose. Not as long as we have you. John met her gaze, seeing the unshakable faith she had in him. It was a heavy burden, but it was also what drove him forward. "Thanks, Sarah," he said quietly. Before they could say more, Liam's voice crackled over the comm. "John, you need to see this." They hurried back to the command room, where the holographic display had changed. It showed the Grisoli fleet in orbit, and Liam pointed to the new readings. "They've sent reinforcements," he said grimly. "And it's worse than we thought. The elites have arrived." John's jaw tightened. So it begins. The storm was gathering, and John knew the next battle would be the most brutal yet. The Grisoli were bringing everything they had, and the humans would have to fight harder than ever to survive. But one thing was certain. No matter how strong the Grisoli thought they were, humanity's will to survive would be stronger. As the underground base hummed with preparation, John felt the weight of the coming war settle in his bones. The elites were coming, and with them, the battle for Earth's future would begin in earnest. The tension inside the underground bunker was palpable. Every human soldier, mechanic, and technician was preparing for what would likely be the fight of their lives. The Grisoli reinforcements had arrived in orbit, and the elites, legendary for their brutal efficiency, were on the way to Earth. John knew they had little time before the invasion force struck again. In the command center, the room buzzed with activity. Holographic maps of key battle zones flickered above the table as commanders exchanged strategies and final preparations. John stood at the head of the table, his face a mask of steely determination. "They're mobilizing fast," Liam said, gesturing to the map. "Their drop pods will land in less than 24 hours. When they hit, they'll strike hard and without mercy." John clenched his jaw. "Then we hit harder. Marcus, are our defenses ready?" The grizzled veteran nodded. "We've fortified the city perimeter and placed traps in the ruins. Every corner of that place is rigged to explode if the Grisoli step wrong. Snipers are positioned across the rooftops, and we've spread our forces out. We'll make them fight for every inch." "That's good," John replied, his voice calm but firm. "We can't engage them head-on. The elites are stronger, faster, and better equipped than us. But we have the terrain advantage. We know this city like the back of our hand. We'll lure them in, split them up, and pick them off." Sarah, standing beside him, interjected. "And if we can take down a few of their high-ranking officers, it could throw them into disarray. Their chain of command is rigid, unlike ours. They rely on structure, and if we break that, we can create chaos." John nodded. "Exactly. We need to hit their leadership hard. They'll expect a desperate defense, but we'll give them a smart one." Liam's face grew more serious. "One more thing. We've detected a new signal coming from their fleet. I think they're deploying some kind of jamming technology. Once they land, we'll lose all communications with our other units." A ripple of concern passed through the room. Communication was their lifeline in coordinating the defense. "We'll have to rely on runners then," John said, already shifting tactics in his mind. "Old school. No matter what happens, we can't let them break us apart." The next morning, as dawn broke through the ashen clouds, the first Grisoli drop pods descended from the sky. From the underground bunkers, the human forces watched in grim silence as the glowing pods streaked through the atmosphere like falling stars. The elites had arrived. John stood atop one of the ruined skyscrapers, surveying the battlefield through a pair of binoculars. From this vantage point, he could see the city's shattered skyline, the abandoned streets, and the hastily constructed defenses the resistance had built. In the distance, The first pods hit the ground, throwing up plumes of dust and debris. "Here we go," he muttered under his breath. As soon as the Grisoli elites emerged from their pods, the battle began in earnest. The elites were monstrous, taller and bulkier than the average Grisoli soldier, their bodies augmented with advanced armor and weapon systems. They moved with terrifying precision, sweeping through the ruins like predators on the hunt. John's forces opened fire immediately, sniper rifles cracking from hidden positions, bullets pinging off the elite's armor. Explosions rocked the streets as mines and traps detonated, but the elites pressed on, undeterred. Their shields absorbed most of the damage, and their superior reflexes allowed them to dodge the worst of the human ambushes. "Liam, report." John barked into his radio. "They're spreading out, but they're cautious. Our traps are slowing them down, but not by much." Liam's voice came back, strained. "We're losing contact with some of our units already." John cursed under his breath. "Keep your people moving. Don't let them get pinned down." He turned to Sarah, who was crouched beside him with her rifle. "We need to take out one of their commanders. If we can kill one of the elites leading the charge, it might buy us some time." Sarah gave him a grim nod. "I've got eyes on one. 2 blocks east. He's leading a squad of about 8. It's risky, but if we flank them—" "Do it," John said without hesitation. "I'll take a team and draw their attention. You take the shot when you have it." John and a small squad moved swiftly through the crumbling streets, using the debris for cover. The sounds of battle echoed all around them: explosions, gunfire, and the mechanical whir of Grisoli drones overhead. John's mind was racing, calculating every step, every turn. The elites were fast, but they were predictable in their rigid tactics. As they approached the targeted squad, John's team let loose a volley of grenades, followed by concentrated gunfire. The elites reacted instantly, their shields flaring as they took cover behind the ruins. John kept his head low, firing in controlled bursts. "Now, Sarah," John whispered into his radio. From her vantage point, Sarah took aim. The scope of her rifle zeroed in on the elite commander's exposed helmet. She steadied her breathing, her finger slowly squeezing the trigger. The crack of the sniper rifle echoed through the battlefield. The elite commander's helmet exploded in a shower of sparks and blood. The Grisoli soldiers around him hesitated, momentarily disoriented by the sudden loss of their leader. "That's our cue," John said, rallying his team. They pushed forward, taking advantage of the confusion. Bullets and grenades flew as they closed the gap, taking down 2 more elites before the others regrouped. But the moment of chaos was brief. The remaining elites quickly reorganized, their discipline unshaken. One of them raised an arm, signaling for air support. Within seconds, drones swooped down from the sky, their weapon systems locking onto the human positions. "We've overstayed our welcome," John said, gritting his teeth. "Fall back." His team began retreating through the rubble-strewn streets, ducking into alleyways as the drones rained fire down on them. John sprinted, his heart pounding as explosions went off behind him. He could hear the whine of the drones' engines growing louder, but he forced himself to keep moving. Sarah's voice came over the radio. "Did you make it out?" "Barely," John replied, his breath ragged. "But we got the commander. That'll slow them down. For now, at least." But John knew the elites were relentless. This was only a temporary victory. As the battle raged on, the human resistance fought with everything they had. Their traps and guerrilla tactics slowed the Grisoli advance, but the elites were a force unlike any they had faced before. John could see the toll it was taking on his people. Every skirmish left more bodies in the streets, more comrades lost. In the heat of the fight, John found himself face to face with one of the elites. The massive creature towered over him, its glowing eyes cold and calculating. It moved with the precision of a machine, swinging its energy blade with deadly force. John barely dodged the strike, rolling to the side and firing his rifle at point-blank range. The bullets glanced off the elite's armor, doing little more than slowing it down. The elite lunged again, and John raised his rifle to block, the blade slicing through the weapon like it was made of paper. He stumbled back, desperately searching for an opening. Before the elite could deliver a killing blow, a shot rang out, and the creature staggered. Sarah appeared from the shadows, her sniper rifle smoking. "Thought you could use some help," she said with a smirk. John didn't waste time. He grabbed a grenade from his belt, pulled the pin, and shoved it into the crack in the elite's armor. He dove for cover as the explosion tore the creature apart. Panting, John got to his feet. "Thanks," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Any time," Sarah replied, offering him a hand. The battle wasn't over, but for now, they had survived another day. As night fell, the resistance forces regrouped, battered but not broken. The elites had been dealt a blow, but they were far from defeated. John stood once again in the command center, his eyes scanning the maps and reports. "We can't keep this up forever," Marcus said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "They're wearing us down, and our supplies are running out." John knew he was right. The Grisoli were relentless, and every hour they fought brought the humans closer to the edge. But giving up wasn't an option. Not for John. Not for humanity. "We'll fight," John said, his voice resolute. "We'll fight until we have nothing left. And when that time comes, we'll still find a way to win." The war for Earth had only just begun, but John knew one thing for sure. As long as humanity had the will to survive, the Grisoli would never break them. The final battle was coming, and when it did, humanity would be ready. I hope you had a good time. If you liked my story, do not forget to comment and subscribe to my channel. Goodbye. See you in the next story.